So, this morning, there's a lot going on. We've got a baptism in main service that's going to happen at the end of the service. So, that's exciting. A couple of our high schoolers came back from CIY Move a couple weeks ago and decided they want to get baptized. So, that's going on. And then, Kaylee and Jared had a wedding to go to, so they're gone today. And then Monica is feeling sick, so she's not up here today. And Corbin is on worship team downstairs, so he'll be up momentarily. So that's where all the adults are this morning. In case you're wondering or wondering where your people are, that's where. I'm going to go ahead and get it started. But what have we been in for the last several weeks? Start the party. What's this been about? Let's refresh, because last week we took a little intermission and talked about social media. And so what has this series been about? Okay, what else? How to live the full, abundant life that Jesus promised. Yes, how parties are about celebrating and adding value to life. Is that what you said? Yep. Okay. Anything else? That's pretty good. That's a good summary. Right. As followers of Jesus, we've been given a full, abundant life in Him. That's what Jesus promised. How do we live that out? That's what we've been talking about. We've been talking about that in a plethora of different ways. And so we're going to continue that this morning. And so in order to do that, we've been moving through this, like I said, and there's one essential thing that you have to have at every party, and I'm curious if you guys can guess what it is. Okay, what's the number one most essential thing that you need for any get-together? Food. I would agree, but it's not what I'm thinking of. Say it louder. Music. All right, music absolutely is something that you need at every party. It's what we have playing when you guys walk up here every Sunday morning, because it just sets the environment. We like to have it on behind our games because it just kind of again, sets the mood. It makes things a little bit more exciting, and it kind of eliminates that awkward silence that can happen if there's no music playing. Right? Music is good, right? Turn to the person next to you and tell them your favorite music to listen to. You have 30 seconds. Go. Do we have any common denominators out there? Anybody like music that everybody else tends to like? You like Believer by Imagine Dragons?
I like all of Imagine Dragons.
Yeah, Imagine Dragons is pretty good.
I just like a lot of
Techno music, okay. Toby Mac is good. Do you see what I say? I liked Toby Mac back when he was in DC Talk. You guys listen to DC Talk? No, see, if you like Toby Mac, you gotta go listen to DC Talk. Okay. How about this? What's one song that has to be on every party playlist? It's not a summer party until you hear this song or whatever. It's no. My children love that song, and I'm tired of that song. Good Plans? Okay, I like it. That's a worship song, right? Yeah. Sunday Best. I like that one.
I like one of the worship songs. It was Fake Love.
Fake Love. I like that song a lot too. Time by Imagine Dragons. Waymaker. That's a good one. All right, you guys like worship music as party music. Okay. I actually, there's something that I've been really loving lately. You guys listen to lo-fi? Sometimes I can't listen to normal music while I'm trying to work and get stuff done. And usually that's when I'm listening to music. So instead of listening to music with lyrics, I'll listen to lo-fi music. So there's Star Wars lo-fi, there's pop lo-fi, there's worship music lo-fi. And it's these worship beats that are pretty cool. So if you have Spotify, just go look up worship lo-fi, and a whole playlist will come. It's chef's kiss. It's great. So check that out. But here's if you've been around church for any period of time, right? Speaking of worship music, we often call worship in relation to music. Like we say, oh, we're gonna go to church on Sunday and we're gonna worship together. What do you think we're talking about, right? We're singing songs together. And that's true because all throughout history, like going back to the Psalms, going back to Genesis, going back to Exodus, there are songs of celebration that God's people are singing to God. There's in the Psalms, there's all kind of worship songs. There's songs that are of mourning, of sadness, of triumph, of anger, of grief. There's all kinds of worship songs, but we associate worship with music, and that's true, but it's not the whole truth. Okay, there's more to worship than just music. All right, and oftentimes we don't stop and explain what that really looks like. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, just hold up like how many fingers, 1 out of 10. Like how many of you feel like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you connect with God through music? Okay, 10 being I connect with God all the time, anytime I'm listening to worship music or I'm at church or whatever. And 1 being like the music doesn't help me connect to God. So show me on your hand, scale of 1 to 10, how much does music make you feel connected to God? Okay? We got some high numbers, we got some low numbers. Everybody's wired differently, right? So this is my point. For those of you who connect to God really well, 10 out of 10 through music, great. But for those of you who don't, when we associate worship as something that only happens when we're singing songs together, we might miss the bigger deal of what worship actually is. I think all of us should acquire a taste for being able to connect with God through music, because I think psychologically there's studies that have been done that music just helps you connect in a different way. But for those of you who maybe haven't expanded your thinking of what worship is outside of just singing songs together, this is going to be really good and important for you too, because worship is so much more rich and deep than that. But what if worship, it's actually more than just songs and a prayer, but what if God is a creative God who put creativity in us in order to creatively worship? Let me say that again, because that was kind of a tongue twister and I have to read it. What if God is a creative God who put creativity in us to creatively worship? In other words, because God is creative, what if one of the best ways that we worship is through creativity? Right? And this is something I want us to sit on for a minute, all right? We're going to look to a passage of Scripture in the Gospel of Luke, which Luke was not one of the eyewitnesses to Jesus, but rather he was a physician, he was an analyst. He went around and he interviewed and he talked to all the people who were with Jesus, some of Jesus' disciples, other people, and he investigated, and then he wrote his gospel based off all of those eyewitness testimonies, even though he himself was not an eyewitness testimony. And so each of the gospels share a little bit of a different perspective. And Luke's perspective, he writes some of these stories, and this is what he was writing about a situation where Jesus was going to a Pharisee's home, which a Pharisee was just one of the religious leaders at the time. They were the ones that thought they had it all together, and they were always trying to trip Jesus up and catch him in a trap and get him in trouble. And so Jesus is at this Pharisee's house. He's been invited over for a party, and check out what happens, right? When a certain immoral woman from the city heard that Jesus was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. Then she knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. Now, it's 2023. We don't wash feet, and we don't kiss feet, and that would be really weird. Like, I dare you to go to your friend's house one time and be like, hey, what's up, man? And just bend down and start kissing his feet, right? Like, would anybody else be weirded out by that, right? Let's just acknowledge that today's culture is a little bit different than 2,000 years ago, okay? But what you have to recognize is that in this day and age, like, there's a number of things we should recognize here. One, people had to wash their feet when they go into a house because they walked on dirt roads and sandals, and so their feet were just dirty. So it was custom to wash your feet before you go somewhere. washing of feet was a servant's job, right? It was a dirty job, it was a nasty job. And so there's that. The kissing of feet is a sign of respect or worship in a sense. And also, women were often viewed as property. They didn't have the same rights as men, and this was just a different culture. And so all of these factors come into play. And as Jesus is attending this party of a Pharisee, of a religious leader, this woman, who the text says is immoral, meaning just she was someone, the Pharisee actually calls her a sinner in verse 39. And so she comes in, and she starts kneeling, and she's obviously emotional, she's upset, she's crying, and she's using her tears to wash Jesus' feet. And she uses an alabaster jar of perfume, very expensive, and he uses that as well. So it gives off a pleasing aroma. Right. So all of these factors are happening. All this is at play. And what I want you to recognize here is that even though that seems a little weird to us today, there was probably no higher way of showing respect or worship towards somebody than what she did. Right? And the Pharisee in the room, he was like, I mentioned he calls her a sinner. He does not like this. The people at the party, they're thinking like she is not worthy to come in here and do this. She's undeserving to be in the presence of Jesus, or any of us, the Pharisees probably thought. And so she's out of place. But she used what she had. She had her perfume. She had her hair. She had her tears. She used what she had to worship Jesus however she could. Now, that's the part I want you to focus on. She used what she had to worship Jesus however she could. How many of us can say that about ourselves? Just think about that. How often do we use what we have in order to give praise and glory to God? She comes in knowing she's going to be the outcast because she believes in Jesus, has faith in him, and wants to demonstrate her worship to him. She didn't allow anything to distract her from the full life that she knew that Jesus could offer. And she got creative with what she had. She came and she wanted to show worship to Jesus. And I think that's so powerful because Jesus actually, he looks at her and he's pleased. He recognizes what she's doing. And actually, later in the chapter, he rebukes the Pharisees. He says, because remember, it's customary to wash your feet or to have your feet washed when you come in. And Jesus, I told you the Pharisees were always trying to trap him. He says, actually, he corrects the Pharisees. He says, nobody washed my feet. No, nobody came and did anything for me here, even though you're hosting me. But she came in and she gave everything she had, right? And he actually praises her for her faith, right? This is what's important. Often the times that we think we're unworthy or undeserving, that doesn't disqualify us from being able to give everything we have to him. That doesn't disqualify us from being creative about how we worship God. We'll come back to that in a second. But God modeled creativity for us, right? Think about it this way. You go out in the world that we live in, you see all the things, and it's so easy for us to kind of pass this by, right? We live comfortably. Most of us have AC. We spend a lot of our time inside. A lot of times we miss the creativity of the world. We miss what God has done. But God has done so much to show us what he is able to do in his own creativity. He chose to give us all color. Even think about the way that your eyes perceive light. He gives all these different colors. It's like a palette of paint with all these different colors in the hands of the master artist. This is God. And instead of making things look dull and plain, he makes things vibrant and beautiful. Let me just walk you through several of the ways that God chose to show this off for us. Think about nature, right? Can anybody guess how many species there are? Anybody know how many species of plants and animals there are on this earth? A lot. More. More.
Jillion?
I don't know what that is. That's a lot. Okay, check this out. There are around 8.7 million species, but only 1.2 have actually been identified, which is nuts. Right? I've got a picture of some animals. Like there's all kinds of different species of animals and plants and wildlife, and we've only scratched the surface of if you guys ever studied like ocean deep stuff, like in deep ocean stuff, there's like tons of species we don't even know yet because we haven't gone that deep. God could have just called it a day, but he decided to give us the platypus, right? Which is we don't know what to do with that. We're like, is it a duck? Is it a beaver? Is it a fish? Like we don't know what to do with that. But what's the actual classification of a platypus? You don't know? I see. I thought somebody over here would know. Anybody know? I don't know. Is it a duck? Corbin's going to look it up. We'll have that answer for you shortly. All right, check this out. You think about how creative God is with plants, animals, and the colors and all that stuff. Think about us. Think about how he created us, you and me. Right? All of us are different. We have different hobbies, different backgrounds, different hair color, eye color. Some of us are tall, some of us are short. We all are different, right? God has created us with such variety, right? Think about a sunset, right? A sunset or just the mountains, right? You see that? God could have made the earth plain, but instead he did that. Think about the waterfalls. Have you guys ever been to like a really big waterfall like Niagara Falls or something like that? It's incredibly beautiful to be around. Or think about how big the ocean is. Right? Have anybody been to the beach? You just see like for miles just endless ocean, endless water, or the endless skies. You look up into the sky and it's such a vibrant and deep blue. And sometimes God paints it with clouds for us, right? Think about the smell of flowers or leaves on the trees and the different variety of trees. And you go into a forest and you just see all of these different, and the sun leaking through all the leaves. You see that fall's one of my favorite seasons of the year because all the leaves change and you get all this dynamic range of colors in the trees. But you go outside and it doesn't take a genius to go out and just behold the beauty of the master painter. God is a creative God. So creative that we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of just how creative he is. And I have to think that most of us, if God created us with all his creativity, and God's given each and every one of us unique gifts and abilities, skill sets, ways of seeing the world, there are an infinite number of ways that we can worship him. But what's important is that, like the woman in the story, we use what we have and figure out how we can give it to him in worship. We use what we have and we give it to him in worship. Think about all the creative ways that we could do that. A party starter understands that there are creative ways to worship God, right? We're made in the image of a creative God, which means that we are creative too. Now, some of you, I understand that you don't look in the mirror and think, wow, I'm such a creative person, right? But God, think about it not as like arts and crafts, but think about it as like God has given you a mind that is unique from anybody else's. And you can use whatever you have in a creative way. In a way that maybe is outside the box of what you would think your skill set or what you have uniquely. It's outside of what it's originally supposed to be used for, you might think. There's all kinds of examples. You see Christian athletes that are vocal about their faith in interviews and stuff. And think, hey, they have a skill set of bouncing a ball and throwing it through a hoop, but they're using their platform as a way to elevate their creator. They're being creative about the ways that they can show who God is. And then you've got things like the arts, music, painting, drawing. Some of you maybe digital art, photoshopping, AI. Anybody ever tried AI art yet? Like, that's kind of fun to mess around with. Here's a philosophical question. If you create AI art, are you an artist? Something to think about, okay? But think about the limitless creativity options that you have with that, right? Like there's all kinds of ways that God has given you to worship. Different things that you can use at your disposal in order to worship Him. I want you to think about, and you'll get the opportunity to practice this a little bit in a minute. But think about the ways that you can creatively worship God, right? Think about the ways that you can do that. Maybe it's just got to start with you writing down some ideas. Maybe it's got to start with you going outside and actually getting out of your house and walking in nature, breathing in the fresh air, right? Listening to the leaves blowing in the wind, right? And just noticing the little things that maybe you might ordinarily pass by. And allow that to inspire you to worship, right? It's so much more than music. Music is great because we can do it together. We can all sing together. It's a unifying thing. That's why we call it corporate worship. We're all corporately worshiping together. But it's also so much more than that. You have ways that you can worship God. Romans chapter 12 says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is your spiritual act of worship. Or this is how you live a life of worship. By submitting your life to Him. By using what you have for Him. For His glory. For His purposes. That means He gets the attention. He gets the credit. Not you. That's what worship is. You live your life in such a way that it points back to God. A party starter understands that there are creative ways to worship God.